Auspicious blessings to all. Last week, we arrived at an understanding of the human condition through an introduction to the 5 factors of experience. This understanding ties in directly with today's focus. Buddhist practice was developed based on the Buddha's insights into the human condition and has the goal of leading one to enlightenment. In other words, it has the goal of acknowledging and eliminating mental afflictions and ignorance so that one may see the world clearly and as it is through the eyes of prajna wisdom, that is, direct insight into the truth or reality of being. It allows one to live in the world but not be bothered by it, and intricately engaged with its affairs, still not caught up in them. However, successful Buddhist practice is dependent on certain prerequisites. According to the Buddha, there are 3 aspects of successful Buddhist practice, namely morality, meditation, and wisdom, or the threefold training. These 3 categories of training are not individual components of practice. Rather, they are interconnected and interdependent aspects of holistic Buddhist practice. And because of this, meditation or Buddhist practice needs to be based on morality and guided by wisdom for it to be effective. But before we embark on a journey accustoming ourselves with Buddhist practice and training, let us revisit our understanding of the human condition by contemplating on the words of the Buddha portraying the way we react to the world. Bhikkhus, these 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions. What are 8? Gain and loss, disrepute and fame, blame and praise, and pleasure and pain. These 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions. Bhikkhus, an uninstructed worldling meets gain and loss, disrepute and fame, blame and praise, and pleasure and pain. An instructed noble disciple also meets gain and loss, disrepute and fame, blame and praise, and pleasure and pain. What is the distinction, the disparity, the difference between the instructed noble disciple and an uninstructed worldling with regard to this? As for the uninstructed, gain obsesses his mind, and loss obsesses his mind. Fame obsesses his mind, and disrepute obsesses his mind. Blame obsesses his mind, and praise obsesses his mind. Pleasure obsesses his mind, and pain obsesses his mind. He is attracted to gain and repelled by loss. He is attracted to fame and repelled by disrepute. He is attracted to praise and repelled by blame. He is attracted to pleasure and repelled by pain. Thus, involved with attraction and repulsion, he is not freed from birth, from old age and death, from sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and anguish. He is not freed from suffering, I say. We recall that last session, we talked about how our volitions grasped onto sensations, perceptions, and mental actions such as emotions, opinions, and intentions, and even to the consciousness itself. It sees the fleeting vicissitudes of life as oneself, and because of this, one is vexed. So how does the threefold training address this existential issue that we have? Well, we will approach this from a more practical standpoint today. Essentially, morality, meditation, and wisdom address 3 corresponding levels of the mind that is physical and verbal acts, which is the coarse manifestation of the mind, the active mental states or manifestations, or the middle manifestations, and finally, the latent or subconscious tendencies, which are pretty much the finest manifestations of the mind. Although we understand that all dissatisfaction and suffering stems from our minds and its lack of ability to understand self and experiences clearly, it is difficult to deal directly with the mind to remedy such dissatisfaction. The mind moves too quickly and is just like a monkey, jumping from one tree to another and doing what it wants to do, being quite uncontrollable. So running after this monkey, we fail to catch it, and soon we may give up and let it be, albeit unwillingly. Similarly, our minds jump from one desire to another, from one instance of anger and resentment to another. And no matter how much we try to stop it, we can't. Just say there was a couple who had deep-seated anger issues. They don't realize they have anger issues, which is the case for most people who are in a similar situation, until it's too late. This is because the ego does not see its own problems. Most times, when there is no trigger for this underlying seed of anger, it goes unnoticed and life goes on normally. But as soon as there is a trigger, then boom, this anger becomes active in one's mind, and if left unrestrained, this anger may manifest through actions. Just say this couple is just about to get physical, and we come along and say, hey, stop being angry at each other. Most likely, you won't prevent a fight. But when we threaten them by calling the police, most people will stop, since there is this understanding of the consequences involved. If not, when the police turned up, at least they will be forced to stop, either way. So although the couple stops fighting in the end, their minds may still be fighting with each other. From this scenario, we understand that identifying the subconscious tendencies is difficult, and controlling the mind of anger is equally difficult. Though controlling our bodies is slightly easier, since our actions and speech are more easily identifiable. And when we work to keep check on our actions and speech in face of anger and greed, we at least stop entertaining this ego of ours, reducing its potency and vice. As such, entry into Buddhist practice usually starts with addressing the coarse manifestations of the mind, that is, actions and speech, and continues with mental development that addresses active mental states, and finally working on the subconscious tendencies. Let's look at self-regulation of outward behavior from a developmental point of view. When we were young, when we were babies, we would have the mindset, I see, I want, I take it, it's mine. So just say you're a baby, you see your parents' cell phone, we'll take it, right? We'll put it in our mouth, we'll try to sense it with all our sensory organs and try to make sense of it. But we think it's ours. So whenever our parents try to take away the phone out of our grasp, we start crying. The same goes with toys. We take our friends' toys or our siblings' toys without their permission, because we don't know at that time. We see, we want, we take, it's ours. And then when our parents come to take this toy away from us and return it to the rightful owner, which is our siblings, who is our siblings, then of course we will react emotionally, thinking that, oh, that's mine, you've taken my thing away. But later, as the infant develops into a toddler, he or she is taught, no, not everything you want becomes yours. Soon enough, there is this understanding that wanting does not equate to having. This lessens the ego just that little bit more. And as the child grows older, although he or she may want things, he or she will not take things without permission, understanding that it is not right and that there is moral consequences involved. So long as the child keeps within the ethical boundaries of society, he or she will be no threat in the future, and consequently will be no threat to his own freedom, and he or she maintains a clear conscience free of guilt. This freedom from guilt and blame allows the child to live happily and without regrets, and is conditioned further to not let greed dictate one's actions. And good regulation of the coarse manifestations of the mind through living morally in action and speech conditions the mind to follow suit. One who is peaceful in action and speech will most likely be peaceful in mental actions. And when mental actions are calm and peaceful, the mind becomes clear and subconscious tendencies have no cause to manifest. The way the three trainings are interconnected is explained by the Buddha rather clearly. Bhikkhus, for a virtuous person, for one whose behavior is virtuous, right concentration possesses its proximate cause. For one possessing right concentration, the knowledge and vision of things as they really are possesses its proximate cause. Another important point to note here is that the three trainings are that which leads to a heightened state of being. The Buddha states, there are these three trainings. Which three? The training in heightened virtue, the training in heightened mind, and the training in heightened discernment or wisdom. This means that the ethical discipline and virtue required to foster morality needs to lead one beyond the limitations of what we conventionally understand as morality. It needs to be universal, timeless, and selfless. The same is true for the trainings of meditation and wisdom. It also needs to be in accord with inspiring the insightful wisdom that allows one to see the human condition clearly and work to address the problematic ego. The purpose of morality can be summed up by the famous line, to avoid all evil, to cultivate good, and to cleanse one's mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. Practicing morality, or shila, is living life attuned to our inherent goodness. Shila is translated as skillful conduct, discipline, ethical conduct, moral conduct, virtue, and so forth. And compassion is the basis of shila. Morality here does not refer to obedience, a sense of obligation, or external restraint. It refers to an ethical compass within ourselves and relationships for that matter, that guides us to maintain harmony both in our interactions with others and within our own conscience. It is the practice of non-harm and non-violation of self and others. It can also refer to intentional behavioral discipline, virtue, or ethics, according to one's commitment to the Buddhist path of awakening. Shila has 3 degrees of manifestation. The highest degree is inner virtue, the innate goodness of all beings. The second degree refers to virtuous actions of body and mind inspired by inner virtue, while the third refers to the guidelines for conduct governing actions of body and speech, which are designed to bring them in accord with our ethical ideals. There are proscriptive and prescriptive guidelines pertaining to morality. The proscriptive guidelines entails abandoning negative actions of body and speech and mind that bring harm to oneself and others, such as killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, and intoxicating oneself beyond rational thought, or actions inspired by anger or greed. The prescriptive guidelines entail virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind, such as generosity, patience, gentle speech based on compassion and loving kindness, and so forth. And all of this which leads one towards developing wholesome mental states conducive of meditation. The most common guidelines is the 5 precepts, which are not killing, not stealing, not lying, not taking intoxicants, and not engaging in sexual misconduct. It is important to make the distinction here between externally enforced rules and the willful following of ethical guidelines. No one can ever force us to abide by the precepts per se, as the observance of precepts is a personal vow and aspiration to better oneself. So why is the development of morality a prerequisite for meditative practice? From a Buddhist perspective, all beings have a Buddha nature, the inherent potential to perfect the human condition and become a Buddha. This Buddha nature is analogous to inner virtue or inner goodness. It is also the source of our potentiality to do good. Going against our inner virtue by engaging in unwholesome deeds creates disharmony in our minds, as we are going against our clear conscience. Shila functions as the foundation for meditation in 2 ways. First, the observing of Shila promotes a clear conscience, essential to the development of concentration. It prevents us from being harassed by restlessness and feelings of guilt. Secondly, observing the precepts and engaging in virtuous actions of body and speech unifies the mind and prevents us from being caught up in a crossfire of incompatible motives, disruptive of the meditative frame of mind. As we meditate, we are intending to settle the defilements of greed, anger, and ignorance so that the mind can achieve a certain degree of peace. If we allow ourselves to act in violation of the precepts, defilements will be triggered and meditation will be hindered. Training in meditation deals with the active mental states and entails 2 main aspects of meditation: samatha and vipassana, or in other words, calming and insight. Samatha works to develop a deep, static state of one-pointed concentration on a subject of meditation or focus, and leads to samadhi, a state of mental tranquility that is unperturbed by either internal or external disturbances. After one achieves one-pointed concentration, one then turns to develop wisdom through vipassana, or insight into the reality of phenomenon, by developing the 4 bases of mindfulness, whereby the type of concentration that accompanies this practice is a fluid, moment-to-moment mindfulness, or attentiveness that observes the incessantly changing states of mind and phenomena. There are also different types of practices leading to the state of meditation, and this will be discussed in detail during subsequent sessions. The training in wisdom entails developing prajna, the type of wisdom that allows one to see things as they really are and informs us on how to live happily and peacefully. We will be going through teachings of the great perfection of wisdom and concepts such as emptiness and dependent origination in detail during the 2nd semester. Essentially, Buddhist practice entails training in morality, meditation, and wisdom, which address three corresponding levels of the mind, that is, physical and verbal acts, active mental states or manifestations, and latent or subconscious tendencies. Morality is usually seen as an entry point into the threefold trainings, as our actions and speech are more easily identified and addressed. What we have introduced today are just very broad categories of holistic Buddhist practice, and during the rest of the semester and the next, we will be going into all specific practices one at a time. I hope this session has provided you with a framework for understanding Buddhist practices. In the meantime, take care, stay safe, and see you next week. Auspicious blessings.